Okay, you guys can get out your notes. We are going to get this unit finished up, and it won't take but just a few minutes. So you guys listen up, and we will get started. You guys can actually turn to page 250, 255 in your book, and we'll go over this stuff. And we're just going to kind of go through each part, and then we'll talk about it as a whole. So olfactory, anytime you hear that word olfactory, think sense of smell. So olfactory cortex, that's the part of the brain that has to do with the sense of smell. Olfactory receptors, that's what's actually going to pick up smell. So think of it that way. Okay, the olfactory region is actually in the top side of each of your nasal cavities, and it's about the size. This book said a dime, but my last book said it's actually about the size of a stamp. And so if you think of like a little stamp in the top of your nasal cavity, that's actually where this region is. That's the only place there's smell receptors. Okay, so all receptor cells, these are actually called chemoreceptors. Think chemo like chemical receptors. They pick up chemicals in the air. So that's the receptor cells. They're an afferent neuron. They are neurons because they're sensory. And they pick up that message and send it to the brain so our brain can then interpret what it is. Olfactory hairs, these are actually little hairs that are on the receptor cells. They actually sit in this mucus, I think it was called a mucus layer, that the hairs, like mucus is wrapped around these layers. And so that's actually where the smells in the air will absorb into that layer, into those hairs. And then it moves on down to filaments, and then it moves through the nerve, the olfactory nerve. It's one of the cranial nerves. Excuse me. And then the bulb is whenever it gets closer back to the brain, so it just keeps getting bigger. Olfactory receptor cells are very, very sensitive. It actually only takes just a few drops of, not even drops, but a few odor molecules for us to actually be able to smell, what's in the air. It doesn't take much at all. But another thing to know about our sense of smell is that it really adapts. So, like if I wear the same cologne all the time, I may not be able to tell. It's like it wears out or it builds up a tolerance. So, if you smell something over a certain period of time, it may not smell to you, but it may smell to other people. The other thing to know about the olfactory is the pathway back to the brain, where these nerves go through the head toward the brain, is it actually passes through what's called the limbic system. Limbic, Lambic, and that is the area of your brain that's actually in charge of emotions. And so that's one of the reasons they say that, smells can really trigger memories, is because of that nerve going through that center, that emotional center in your brain. So just a thought. Anyways, pretty interesting. Okay, the way that we smell. So you can kind of see this kind of looks like a little stamp up here at the top of your nasal cavity. There you can see this olfactory receptor cell. And then these hairs that are on the end of it. And then here you can see down here this mucus layer that's on those hairs. So basically these odor molecules enter the nasal cavity. They would reach up to here where these chemoreceptors are. It only takes a few, remember. And then it travels from there, from those hairs back down the neuron, and it'll eventually go back to the brain to interpret what you're smelling so that you can tell if it's something that's dangerous or something that, whatever. says that odor molecules then dissolve in the mucus layer that surround these olfactory hairs, so they get it kind of absorbed in here. Well, when they do that, then the hairs on these bipolar neurons actually they're the ones that kind of like pick up that scent and send the message to the brain. Pretty cool. Injuries and disorders of the nose. So rhinitis, rhino is nose and itis is inflammation. So it's just inflammation of the nasal membrane. It can be caused by a cold, infections, drugs can cause it, all kinds, anything that you could put into your nose or could do to your nose. We haven't, okay, septum problems. So septum is like that middle section that separates the right side of your nose from the left. And a deviated septum means it's like significantly off center from the rest of their nose. So it's pretty interesting, I think. Sorry, I got hung up there for a second. Lost my spot too. Oh, deviated septum. So there's another thing. People can actually also get a perforated septum, and a perforated means that it's like worn a hole. That's a common injury to someone who does drugs that they snort like into their nose, is to get a perforated septum. Okay, gustatory sense. So gustatory, when you hear that word, think taste. Okay, olfactory is smell, gustatory is taste. Okay, so we've all heard of our taste buds. What you may not realize is that they're actually a little smaller than what you probably think. I know sometimes when you look at your tongue, you think, oh, I can see the taste buds. But that may not necessarily be so because taste buds are very small. Couple important things to know in general. One is that taste is influenced by smell, like greatly influenced. So without smell, you're not going to be able to taste very well. Our mouth has approximately 10,000 receptors, okay, to take in tastes. Our tongue has five basic tasks, or five tastes, I'm sorry, not tasks, tastes. And so we've got sweet, salty, bitter, sour. And this book actually named a new one called umami. And maybe someone may have to correct me on that. But that's like a taste that's for, like, I don't know, that's a taste that's for, it said beef and processed foods. And I've heard before that we have a different one for processed foods. But anyway, so pretty interesting there. Okay, so taste buds. Well, you can find taste buds actually in your mouth. They're on your lips, they're in your cheek, they're in the back of your mouth, and the roof of your mouth. Those on, and of course, you see most of them on the tongue. But they're actually on top of what's called papillae, and these are actually the little bumps that you like see on your tongue. Those are called papillae. Um, let's see. Okay, so when you're thinking about taste buds, you think about how I was looking for a different picture, but I don't see it. As you're thinking about how smell work or food works. So it said food is mixed with saliva, and that produces what's called tastants. Okay? And tastants then stimulate these gustatory hairs, and when those hairs are stimulated, okay, then that message travels on to the brain. And that's how you figure that. Pretty cool. So, that's kind of the main things as far as So, anyways, let's look at disorders of the tongue. Okay, infection. So, severely bitten tongue during a traumatic accident or a tongue piercing, both of these could cause infection. I mean, you could have, you can always get an infection, but those are, two of the more common infections or problems with the tongue. Injury, of course, just like I said, like something happens and you injure it. One thing, though, to know is that the tongue actually heals more quickly than any other part of the body. Have you ever noticed that you've bitten your tongue really good and then the next day or the next, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not in there. I hadn't even thought about it in 2 days. Well, there you go. It heals really quickly. So abnormal growth. So first one on here is hairy tongue. That's what it's called. And basically it's just like an overgrowth of those little gustatory hairs. But a lot of times you can see it. It's kind of gross. But they said the best way to prevent it is to just, keep good hygiene, but also make sure you guys are brushing your tongues when you brush your teeth. Make sure you brush your tongue, okay? That's one of the things that said would prevent hairy tongue. And the last one is burning mouth syndrome. And they said that it can last for months or years. Yeah, so that's one crazy thing. But they said that you do have that sense of numbness, like burning all the time. So definitely a thought. And other than that, I think that is it. I think that's pretty much it for this unit. This is a really short one, so I hope you guys have a wonderful day.